I think this is on. Yeah. You have to forgive me, I'm a little new to this. My name is Captain Troop, United States Space Navy, assigned to the USS Freedom Ring. This is my first video log of the voyage. We are underway, and I'm just going to kind of recap the interesting nature of this deployment. I was originally stationed at the United States Space Naval Academy, Mars. Academy Mars is typically kind of the casual way of saying it. I was working on my dissertation, trying to get a PhD in the study of the new biosynthetic AI and its impact on the United States Space Navy and commercial sectors. My general thesis is really wrapped around the idea is whether or not these beings are conscious. There's a bit of a debate floating around Earth right now as to whether or not the use of biosynthetic AI labor is ethical, if these beings, synthetic as they are, have actually attained consciousness, if they themselves require certain rights. And right now there's a lot of interest going in every direction to determine whether or not those groups should be given rights. That's my current thesis. That's what I'm currently working on and trying to determine. Or at least I was. I think I am still. I spoke to Fleet and was given an opportunity to get back onto a command, which was nice. They had the cruiser USS Freedom Ring, one of the first deep cruisers meant for operations between the Mars Gate and the Inner Belt Gates, and it's been in dry dock, space dry dock, and it's been getting worked on. So I was given the opportunity to take command after the current commander was about to retire. The idea being that I would conduct a change of command ceremony, go back to Mars U, and just kind of hang out there. It's not been a complicated assignment, at least in my mind. I figured, that's pretty simple. I can continue to work on my paper. And I didn't exactly get to experience that. So not too long ago, about a couple days ago, I was transferred to the USS Freedom Ring. The captain outgoing, whom I won't name, very nice individual, was retiring. So the change of command ceremony went by lovely. It was great. Dress blues, everything was wonderful. And I went up to the captain's sea cabin, having assumed command. We sat down, got my X-Lords from Fleet, and figured this was going to be a simple situation. Figured, all right, I'm going to read these. It's going to say USS Freedom Ring remains docked. It's going to continue to receive updates, skeleton crew. Captain's night orders are going to be real simple. Not going to have to conduct anything crazy. I'll have plenty of time to work on my paper. Well, that's not what the exec orders said. The execute orders were for a freedom of navigation operation. And the USS Freedom Ring is now underway to the Inner Belt to conduct a freedom of navigation exercise across one of our closest inner belts to show the flag, so to speak. And I kind of sat there in shock and went, I thought I was going to be having a simple a couple years to continue to work on my paper while this ship remained in dry dock, and yet here we are. I'm still kind of processing, but I did what any good captain would do. I read the orders, I scanned them, I looked for the intent from the fleet, I looked for my risks, I looked for the rules of engagement, I looked to see if anything was kind of vague or missing. I looked to see if there's anything I needed to mitigate, and I began to execute a plan. I was like, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to craft my intent for the crew, and I'm going to go ahead and we're going to conduct this. It's 2 years. It's, 14 days to get out, 1.7 AU between Mars Gate and the Inner Gate and the Belt. Figure 8-9 months transit each way. 2-4 months out there, waving the flag, showing the world that we still have dominance in this sector. I mean, it's an important mission set. I get it. I understand. As soon as the space belt became habitable and commercialized, once private interest and commercial interest got out there, the United States government decided, we need a space navy for the same reasons we need a maritime navy around the Earth itself. As soon as there's money to be made, Well, of course, there's going to be countries that want to make that money. And Mars became one of the first hubs that people would go to before navigating out into the inner belt. So, the West set up a hub, the East set up a hub, and as we exist in this bipolar reality where China and the nations of their, I want to say their closest allies have developed their own Mars Gate. The United States and Western allies have their Mars Gate. We charge fees and services to keep those gates safe, to keep travel and commerce open. And one of the benefits of that is it helps pay for the United States Space Navy, which ensures that any commercial party with the legal right to be there can have safe navigation between the Mars Gate and the inner belt. And once they get to the inner belt, they can safely conduct resource claims, resource mining, and transit that material back to Mars where it can be distributed or used for the manufacturing and development of more commercial vehicles. So, yeah, I mean, this is an important mission set. I was confused as to why me. The Navy was well aware of the paper I was working on. I was teaching. I had an assignment at the Mars Academy. I was working on developing a new set of doctrine for how we were going to handle these biosynthetics. So it was just confusing. Look, you're a flag officer. You're a senior officer in the United States Space Navy. You do what you're told. So I continued to develop commander's intent. Then I started to look through things more finely. My job, specifically, was to evaluate the readiness of the crew. More so than to conduct the freedom of navigation mission, it was to determine that the crew was satisfactory. It was to determine the full capability of the new crew that was being brought on to man the spacecraft, which is strange. Why would they give the Freedom Ring an entirely new crew? Why would I be responsible for evaluating that crew? Why wouldn't we do that at dry dock? Why wouldn't we do that in a simulation? Why would we be doing that live? There's a classified section that I guess I can get into in these logs that blew my mind. The entire crew, with the exception of myself, was to be made up of the mechanical androids, the classic Mark I, synthetic robots, what you're used to thinking about and seeing, and then the Mark II live synths, the biological-looking androids, were to make up the rest of the officer crew. I was to be the only biologically born organic human aboard the entire ship, and I was to command that ship to the inner belt and back and evaluate the space worthiness of an entirely android crew. Now, for legal reasons, you cannot have a fully android ship operated as a part of the United States Space Navy. You must have a human officer. For more legal reasons, you can't have androids as officers, but that's because they're not allowed to be given command over humans yet, as that's being still held up in courts. So technically, if the XO, NAVS officer, all the other officers are only commanding androids, I guess it is legal for they themselves to be officers. So I sat there and went, okay, I've got to determine commander's intent and brief a mission to an entire crew of androids, and I'm going to be the only human on board for the next 2 years. Now, it's a bit of a challenge for me personally. I didn't know how I was going to be able to handle that. I didn't know, and I'm still trying to figure out the implications of what it's going to mean to be the only human aboard a ship for a 2-year period, but these are my orders. So I sat back, planned out commander's intent, figured out what I was going to do for night orders, and just kind of went, okay. Took a minute, composed myself, and figured out how I'm going to adapt. So I got a knock on the door. It was the new XO, and he was wearing dress blues as if he was at a change of command ceremony. But the dress blues were different. They didn't have gold lace on the shoulder boards or on the sleeves. It was a silver metallic lace, later to what I would find out to be platinum ceramic, but his insignia was intentionally meant to be different to demonstrate that he in fact was a biological android synthetic. And if that insignia wasn't different, there's no way I would have known. When I opened that door and I looked at that individual, I saw a 5'10", average looking skinned, average looking hair, average looking fit, average aged male, as almost as if he was designed to be generic. Not impressive, but not ugly, not anything particularly interesting about that individual, just a space-worthy, fit, reasonably aged male in an Exo's uniform. I greeted him, brought him inside, and said, I'm Captain Troop, here to kind of brief you on what's going on. And I said, what's your name? And he says, I'm the XO. I said, great. And, Commander what? And he goes, I'm just the XO. That was the title given to my position, and that's my name. And I paused and went, oh, this is going to be a very different journey. So I sat with the XO, and I began to explain to him, okay, look, this seems to be fairly routine. We got 14 days. We're going to be under tug. They're going to thrust and take us out to accelerated speed, get us away from Mars Gate. That's going to reduce load on propulsion for us. That'll maximize our acceleration. It'll be about 8 to 9 months. We'll get caught by the other tugs, decelerate. Quick stop at Intergate. Any type of provisions that need to get restocked, go ahead and do that. Conduct a 2-month about roughly. Freedom of navigation, show of force, wave the flag, sail about. If there are escorts required, which there won't be, we would perform that service and then stop back off at Intergate before transit. Make sure we've got everything we need. There's no crew going to port, I guess, because you're all Android. I gave him the full brief. Return back to Mars Gate should be about 24 months. Went over all the task orders, everything that was given, and he was very attentive, very polite, smiled, and understood everything. But it was still strange. It didn't have a last name. It's just an XO. No questions. This was his first time, or its time. We're going to use gendered pronouns because just for the sake of simplicity, I don't want to get into right now whether it's an it or a he, and for the sake of working conditions, it's going to be a he. So, I talked to him and he understood everything. He understood everything perfectly. He had no questions. He understood my intent. I made it clear I wanted a simple and smooth, no hassle, no fuss operation. I wanted to go, wave the flag, smile, move on. I gave him his, operating parameters. I said, look, no offensive or defensive weapons are to be authorized without my express permission. I don't care what time of day. You wake me up, you come find me. He understood. It's as if he was already tactically prepared for everything I was about to say and knew what my intent was. And it seemed like he comprehended it. So I said, hey, let's go ahead and grab the senior officers and I'll brief commander's intent. And for the first time, he spoke up and said, hey, sir, understand, this is a solid idea. May I make a suggestion? I said, yeah, go ahead. He says, listen, sir, we are all androids. Every single one of the senior officers that is a senior officer has a junior officer. The only reason they have a junior officer is so if they need to be relieved, there's someone already there. That junior officer is the exact same level of technical experience, knowledge, skills, and abilities as that senior officer. They'll take command as soon as necessary, and they'll do it just as effectively as their senior officer. So once you brief me with commander's intent, I'm going to be able to distribute that to all of the senior officers as effectively as you would. They will all comprehend and understand it, and they will all execute to the maximum of their capabilities because that's how they're designed and how they operate. So I say all that to say, sir, if you'd like, I can distribute intent for you, and I can guarantee with 100% accuracy that it will be carried out by the senior staff. And I sat back. I didn't know what to do with that. It seems like Space Navy wants to pilot and try a 99.9% Android-operated freedom of navigation mission. It seems like they want me to just make sure that everything's going smooth sailing, and it seems like these androids are more than capable of handling that. So I say, roger that. That sounds pretty good. XO, why don't you go ahead and distribute Commander's intent, and let's prepare the bridge for initial departure and tug through Mars Gate. I got an aye, sir, and he exited the captain's seat cabin, and I just sat there. What's this going to be like? Normally underway, you get some personality, you get some flavor, you get some interesting events, you meet a new and diverse crew. You get some weirdo that shaved someone's mustache off, and now you have to hold a captain's mask because some junior enlisted decided it would be funny to shave someone's mustache, and now some senior enlisted's ticked about it, and you got to deal with it. And or some officer gets caught doing something they shouldn't be, so you got to deal with that. Or there's this politics and people dynamics that I enjoy being a captain aboard a ship, and I've never contemplated the idea of having everyone at the same skill level, the same ability, the same level of tolerance, and just the ability to operate at maximum efficiency at all times. I think this is good for the Space Navy. I understand what they're trying to do. I'm not arguing that. It's just that, for me, this is going to be a challenge. What am I going to do? Obviously, if, let's say, a near-peer adversary were to attempt to make physical contact and get kinetic across the space, I'm going to take over. I'm going to do what I got to do. But what if everything goes right? What if this mission is entirely successful and I prove to be just an observer, giving commands, but an observer? Yeah, this seems fairly lonely. I can tell already that this is going to be a psychological struggle, and I think the Navy understands that. So I think they're evaluating me just as much as they're evaluating the synthetics. Yeah, they seem nice, but everything's a little strange. I give an example. First night on the bridge, we're getting ready to meet up with the tugs. Tugs are these automated nuclear electric propulsion devices that are essentially going to help accelerate us forward. The way space travel works is you're going between the Mars Gate and the Interbelt Gate. Well, you're going to continually accelerate until midway point and then begin to continually decelerate. And the beginning and ends of that arc can be relatively slow based on the propulsion system we're using in the Freedom Ring. Which I should probably explain too. Why do we call it the Freedom Ring? Well, imagine this large cylinder, and around that cylinder, the one end are spokes, and these spokes connect to this big giant ring. Okay, what's that ring do? Well, in space, there's no gravity. So in order for there to be gravity, like, I'm sitting right now, I'm not floating throughout space, we have to simulate it. So we have this 1.5 kilometer in diameter giant habitat ring, and that ring rotates at a certain RPM, and that certain RPM, which I think is like 0.7, gives an approximation of 1g of Earth's gravity so that you can walk around on the inside. And this ring's pretty big. It's actually an interesting piece of engineering. It's split into what we call 26 slices, someone cutely named, and it stuck, Alpha through Zulu. And those slices are just, if you think like a pie and you were to cut it into slices, it's essentially sections. And of those 26 slices, Alpha through Zulu, some of them are, I believe, around 390 meters long. You get 4 decks. Decks 1 and 4 are engineering spaces, HVAC, cabling, cooling, systems like that. 2 and 3 are primarily where we've got our habitat, where actual people live and work. Some sections have 2 and 3 open completely, large galleyways, or large vestibules, large open halls. But primarily, decks 2 and 3 are office space, laboratories, working spaces. The berths for the synthetics, and just the things you need to run a ship. But it's this big, beautiful complex. If you were to try to walk it, it would take something like 2 hours, which is fairly impressive. So on deck 3, towards the outer walls of the habitat, going clockwise when you look at them, are rotating transitways, and they're called ring light. It's the name of the transit system. Essentially, it's just these little shuttles that help you quickly get each slice has a station. They help you get from station to station, and depending where you are in the ship, it might be quicker to take the one going counterclockwise or clockwise, depending which way you're looking, and it'll get you in an emergency to the closest medical unit. And we can prioritize all that. We declare an emergency, we can have that individual get on the closest ring light transit device or transit shuttle and get them to the immediately closest hospital wing. It's all really efficient. It's great. It's pretty cool. And I say all that to say, like, it's now all being manned by androids, which again, it's kind of blowing my mind. So anyway, that's the reason why it's called Freedom Ring. It's essentially one of the first heavy cruisers designed with these HAB rings that are meant for long haul deployments. So as we get ready to go underway, our propulsion is designed to help us do that continual acceleration. These tug devices are automated devices that essentially use a larger, quicker thrust mechanism to get us up to speed so that our engines can take over. That's a 14-day acceleration they get to use. They get to drain their primary propulsion while we get to maintain most of ours, not having spent any, allowing us to conduct our trip as fast as possible to get to that maximum peak acceleration. And then as soon as we start to decelerate, thrusters go invert and go backwards, start to push the deceleration. We're caught on the other end and helped get decelerated by tugs again from their 14 days. Ever since I was a kid, I was fascinated in this stuff. So for me, becoming a captain, joining the Space Navy, this is what I really wanted to do. And seeing this uptick in AI becoming a part of the Space Navy has been truly fascinating. So there's one part of me that acknowledges this is going to be really lonely, but there's another part of me that's just completely obsessed with how cool this is going to be to experience what one of these ships is like. And okay, to return to my original point, first time on the bridge, we're getting ready to meet up with the tugs. Nav officer is, relaying a location, distance to the objects. We're talking about micro accelerations and just getting everything into space. And it's interesting. I am still the captain. Every single one of them will listen to me the second I'm needed, but no one's asking for reassurance. And what I mean by that is everyone is executing their job flawlessly, and they're relaying the information to me, but no one's making sure I'm okay about it. They're giving me navigational coordinates, they're giving me speeds, they're giving me distances, they're telling me what's going on. I'm approving when necessary, but they are working with a sense of precision and autonomy that I'm not used to. No one cares about anything except for doing the job. So there's not a junior officer in there flaunting their ability or skill. There's no one's ego really getting in the way. There's no one trying to outshine the others or demean the others. There's just officers doing their job. There's just crewmen operating the helm and doing what they have to do. There's just a sense of clinical efficiency. It feels like an operating room, but everyone's at the top of their career and no one's stepping on top of each other. It's just well-oiled. So we got into the tugs, and right now we're currently under the acceleration phase through the tugs. We're getting ready tomorrow to go ahead and break from them and start propulsion under our own means, and everything just works. It's interesting because the first night I went to the officers' mess, it seemed like everyone was entertaining me. All the conversation was polite, but they didn't need to really talk too much to each other. They were mostly, it seemed like, putting on a show for me. I talked a lot about my time at the Mars Academy, Mars U. Again, I should not drop all the slang. They were interested in my research. They were interested in the paper I was writing. They did not share any particular opinion either way because they said they didn't want to bias it, but they were excited to show off their efficiency and capabilities. It didn't feel necessarily clinical. It's just these biosynthetics, they're human-like to a point. They're human-like to a point. When it comes to doing their job, they do it, and they carry it out, and there's no fuss, and there's no drama. And from a Navy's perspective, that's beautiful. I love that. But it kind of makes a captain feel like a checkbox. I really am here to make sure that risks are mitigated, that we're operating legally, that this crew is doing as perfectly as the Navy expects it to do. And while I'm here, I will continue to conduct my research and determine what I believe is already true, is that these beings are not conscious. They are just really well-designed computers. They act like it. They don't really yet seem to show any individual personalities. They are, I think, learning me and adapting to me, and we're not even fully underway. We're still getting, tugged. So they're existing well enough, but I think it's going to take a little time for me to really see if they can develop their own unique personalities, what the structures between all of us will be. I'm sitting here a couple days in actually wishing somebody was jealous or petty or difficult to deal with, or there's that guy we all didn't want to be around. I'm not getting it yet. So we'll see. I'm going to continue to do these audio logs, probably not every day. That's a lot, but I'll check in. I'll let everyone know how it's going. I'll probably do another one after we decouple from the tugs and start accelerating on the first part of our journey towards Inner Gate. It's about 1.7 AU away, so I figure 8 months altogether, maybe 9. Should be interesting. Anyway, Captain Troop signing out.